see, building coalition of interest is not only about politics, it's about the actual needs of the community. And but we need to know who we are. We need to know from where we come from as a way of getting the information and understanding the importance, the significance of getting along with others that are in your habitat. So you need to coalesce with them, but at the same time you need to know who you are. In that light, I would like to call the attorney Antonio Martinez, who's the Vice President of the Dominican American National Roundtable representing the state of New York. And he'll give us an example of how can you learn who you are by doing a little research and the significance of that as we create coalition of interest.
All right, thank you. So, we all gathered here today to talk about how our communities can unite. And basically, we have a common goal. We want to assert our political power, be counted from. So, before I get to the research part, which I think you'll find very interesting, I wanted to give some food for thought to think about when we're talking about political power. That really power, the exercise of power, is in a spectrum where you have conquest, control, influence, and liberation. And the highest expression of political power is when you liberate. And I look at the example of Simón Bolívar. What did Bolívar do? He didn't conquer, he liberated. He liberated more countries. From what? He liberated Latin America from the colonialism and the domination of the Spanish. So that is a question as we want to assert and exercise political power. What are we going to do to liberate our communities? And liberate them from what? And from who? Those are the questions we have to ask when we are exercising power. And that, remember, the flow of political power runs best when it's like a river, where it flows into an ocean. When political power pools, it concentrates, it stagnates, it begins to rot. We know what pools of water do. So that's a context I'd like everyone here to think about as we as we are working to become a more united community. And I'm very excited, again, this partnership we have with the Jewish community even extends well beyond Sosua. Because as I went and did some research on this about who is a Dominican, well, you know, how many people have heard of these ancestral DNA types of things, Ancestry.com? Everybody ever heard of that? Well, it's basically a test where you provide a saliva sample and it's blinded and it's sent to a lab and you get back. And it tells you where is your ancestral DNA coming from. And so I know a Dominican, and I did this as a test, and I said, hey, why don't you take a look at this and discover what does it mean to be Dominican? Where does the Dominican come from? Well, in this particular the DNA sample, very interesting results came back. This Dominican had 62% European DNA, of which more than 10% of that DNA was of European Jewish ancestry. It also had 9% Native American. So this Dominican, there's those Taino, Siboney Indian roots were right in there as well. And then you have, in this DNA makeup, 28% African, North African in this particular case. And so the conversation was, well, that's a pretty well-traveled DNA. And that what separates us is merely what our perceptions and our biases are, but really we have so much more in common and so much more to celebrate. in that cultural differences are things to be celebrated, not to be feared, and remembered that even despite what our diversity is, we have so much to share and work together because there's so many things that bring people together. So that individual that I just described to you is myself. And my mother was born in Mocha. Her family has the Jewish lineage in my family. And my sister is very much a practicing Jew. I'm more spiritual. I like the Gandhi approach about love and admiration for all religions. But the whole aspect of this is fascinating, and this is a great opportunity for our communities to really embrace one another, celebrate this, and then look with a common vision, because the problems that affect one community affect the other. We're all trying to figure out how we can get better jobs, how we can get our people educated, how we can have a decent roof over our heads, and how we can have health care. So these are problems that, or challenges rather, that we have to look at. And again,
it was so important to us is because it was one of the very few opportunities for Jews to escape the Holocaust. As mentioned in the film, Trujillo went to a conference at Evian, France in 1938 talking about refugees. Dominican Republic was the really only country, I think, in the Western Hemisphere that opened its doors. We're very, very happy that the Dominican Republic accepted Jews. Almost impossible for Jews to get into the United States, escaping from the Holocaust. That's another reason we're extremely grateful to the Dominican Republic. We're also finding at the time there was extreme anti-immigrant feeling in the United States. And what are we experiencing today? Groundswell of anti-immigrant feeling and attempts to thwart our president's immigration policies. I was very moved by Sosua because of the fact that I knew that so few Jews had been admitted anywhere. But the thing that was most important to me, because I know that Trujillo's, although I should say Trujillo's motives were not truly pure, the fact is the result was a wonderful thing and really a miracle for those Jews who escaped. The thing that I was most impressed with is the fact that this group of non-Spanish speaking refugees from Europe were so welcomed and accepted by the Dominican community. They remain part of the community. I will say that now I know that many of them left. My understanding is they left not because they did not want to be part of the Dominican society, but they wanted to be in places where there was a larger Jewish population. But not all left. We met with a man who was in his 90s who had married, a Jewish man who had married a Dominican woman, and who very proudly showed us pictures of his family. So I will be eternally grateful. I think the important thing to learn from this, and I think we all know, that we are all here willing to stand up for what is right. We're all willing to address inequalities, and it's very clear that we need to work together. And I think we know that, and we certainly will. I think there's enormous potential for Jewish Latino relationships to flourish.
That much louder, we can have a much greater impact. In particular, at AJC, we really put a lot of importance on developing Latino-Jewish relations and coalitions. Joe mentioned we have a Latino and Latin American Institute, which actually we're pleased to be celebrating the 10th anniversary this year of, based in DC. It's just pragmatic. Looking at the story of Sosua, and as Nestor mentioned, we have a shared history that dates way back to the Iberian Peninsula, in fact. And not just in Sosua, but Jewish communities have flourished in many Latin American countries. Actually, my grandmother, her family needed to escape before the Holocaust, the dangerous pogroms in Russia, and because of the quota systems in the US, they could not get in, and they were welcomed in Cuba. we have shared values as well within our communities. We value family, education, justice, equal rights. And we also really, both as he mentioned earlier, we are diaspora communities. We, both of our communities have immigrated to the US at different times and for different reasons. But as we continue to integrate, and even generations later, we maintain very strong ties to a homeland outside of the US. This distinguishes us from other immigrant groups, and it's a way that we can have very rich dialogue around our dual identities, our American identities, and our identities with our homeland. We also have shared concerns. It's deeply embedded in both of our values, histories, to support comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform and a pathway to citizenship. We care about, we're concerned about growing hate crimes that affect both of our communities, and this is an area where we should be standing together when something happens. So our Institute for Latino and Latin American Affairs builds relationships internationally with leaders of Latin American countries, as well as nationally with Latino leaders across the US. We've convened leaders from across the country for full day and weekend dialogues on basically the state of Latino Jewish affairs and advocacy campaigns. We also started the Latino Jewish Caucus in Congress, which is a really phenomenal way for members of this caucus to stand together with each other on issues. And then through our regional offices around the country, we build relationships with organizations and leaders locally to try to impact advocacy issues and just to get to know each other better. Relationships are so important, and dialogue is a very important first step. So in the New York office where I work, we have had a Latino Jewish coalition for several years. And it started with, we did several full-day workshops with facilitators in order to elicit dialogue on issues, the correct topics, like where do we have commonalities? Where do we have differences? What are stereotypes? Where can we work together? And since then, we've really worked to continue to nurture and develop these relationships as well as build new relationships. We try to bring the group together a few times during the year. Like, for example, this year we did a program on the child migrant crisis. And actually, last month, we were really pleased to host a beautiful program at New York City Hall to bring together Latino and Jewish members of the City Council. This was actually a very historic step because while there are nearly an equal number of Jewish and Latino members of the New York City Council, and they know each other very well and they work together, they had never actually formally come together around their identities. And it was co-sponsored with the Jewish Caucus and the Hispanic Federation. I think that having good partners is really important. And Councilman Mark Levine moderated it. He's the head of the Jewish Caucus, and his wife is Latina. He speaks both Spanish and Hebrew fluently. And Speaker Mark Viverito also delivered remarks. And it was just a beautiful event. I hope that it plants the seeds for future efforts and initiatives. And in New York, we also do a lot of diplomatic outreach, so we build relationships with consuls general and ambassadors from Latin American countries as well, including the Dominican Republic. So that's a little bit. I'd be happy to answer any questions later on about some of our work.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll have instances in terms of the relationship with the Jewish community in terms of our pedigree, and some of the panelists will showcase some important piece of information about that. Let's hear from the Vice President of the Dominican American National Roundtable, Reverend Professor Alejandro Benjamin. He teaches at Lorain County Community College and has conducted extensive research about Dominican identity. And I'm sure that he has a very interesting piece of information to share with you regarding Jewish Latino relations.
Thank you, Nestor. Good afternoon. I will do this very short, and in the manner in which I will do this is in terms of anecdote. As Nestor said, I'm a professor of sociology for 30 years at Bergen Community College. My last name is Benjamin, and I went to a process of researching my last name and why Benjamin or the smallest sons of Jacob. And my second last name is Volquez. Every last name who in EZ or ED or Martinez, Enriquez, Volquez have a Jewish connotation. My wife who's here, also travels to Israel and to the Middle East. And also my practice of religion as a minister in Patterson, New Jersey, has a very interesting anecdote because in Shabbat I put a talit on and practice Torah. And you saw this morning when I pray in
The breakfast.
in Hebrew. It is emotional also because you discover how much commonality you have in terms of humanity. In my traveling into Spain, I went to teach in La Universidad Complutense in Madrid. I went to the ghettos of Madrid, and I noticed the relationship between Dominicans or Latinos or people who went and discovered Columbus, and the relationship of Dominicans with that population. So my anecdote is more personal and is more theological, perhaps, in terms of my presentation. The idea is that every community has to learn by models, and I practice some kind of notes saying that our language, the Spanish language, is 33% Arabic/Jewish, 33%.
33%.
The idea of methodology that we use for our family is very close to the one that is matriarchy. Your mother is important in our family system. We need to understand that in terms of the methodology that this group have, or this ethnic group, because Judaism is a religion, is not a race, has given to the world. Actually, the idea of Judaism is in our culture, in our Christian denominations, in our Judeo-Christian society, is that we were taught anti-Semitism. And in order for me, as an anecdote, this is my anecdote, I need to reduce my anti-Semitic upbringing, my anti-Semitic perceptions, and adapt it in my family of origin, that is my wife and my kids, some of the practice of Judaism. For example, I raised my children telling them that they needed to go to college. So one of my daughter finished a master's degree when she was 24. We celebrate Sedar in my house. We celebrate Shabbat in my house. We composed and took all these good practices and went into the family. And I have 3 children, and my son, Alejandro Benjamin, was told in the table in which we celebrate that he needed to become a lawyer. There is no discussion about knowing and acquiring knowledge, and I learned all that from the Jewish tradition of Sedar, or sitting in your family and trying to get those values of unity. So for us, Latinos, we need to learn the concept of the idea of Judaism. I learned, therefore, that I was a marrano because of my Volquez. I am a marrano. Because of my marrano. You know what marrano is? That is the way the Christian used to tell the Jewish people who immigrated into the New World. So marranos was a concept, so I am one, because of my Polkis
That's interesting.
origin. So we need to research, we need to engage in conversations like this and try to connect. Listen, I am also a grower of mangoes in Dominican Republic. I grow mangoes, right? What I did, I took some of the Jewish methodology of growing in the desert, and I'm going to Israel soon. My wife went to Israel. She went to the area, etc., to Tel Aviv, etc. And I went to the Jewish library and looked at how they plant things in a very arid zone, an arid way in Barahona, that looks like the Arab and the Middle Eastern land. And I learned to put a mango tree, a fig tree together, and created an ecosystem in the middle of the desert. And actually, I learned that from Jewish agriculture. So I am a practitioner of good behavior. I'm a practitioner of good things that will enhance not only my development, but the development of my family. I do the same with my community. I try to do things from that perspective. And one of the things that I also learned with my very nice Jewish friend, because I've been working at Bergen Community College for the last 30 years, and I have all these Jewish friends that I visit their house. If they have a lot of money, if they have a lot of money and a lot of knowledge, they will not show it. And Dominicans, when they have 2 cents, they try to show it to everybody. So we need to learn humbleness. Humbleness is the characteristics that are going to take us to be able to do coalition of interest. If you're arrogant and you try to show too much or that you know everything, that is not the Jewish way. If you're humble, if you're able to learn anything, you learn it. So Freud, Einstein, and all the friends who actually developed theory of development was from the Jewish community. So it's a lot of people in the Dominican Republic who needed to know that their roots, their Marrano identity is a very good one. So I am encourage you from this anecdote that I just presented, that is good. I never stopped studying. I learned that from the Jewish tradition. And if you go to my house, there is a menorah, there is a menorah in there, and there is also a mezuzah, and it's also, you will enter a house of shalom. Thank you very much for my Jewish friend who didn't know that a black man could be Jewish too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Latinos are Jewish too, Dominicans are Jewish, Puerto Ricans are Jewish. Before we move on to present Antonio Martinez, let us call Carlos Fernandez. Dr. Carlos Fernandez is the director of Rutgers Center for Latino Arts and Culture. And we are so appreciative of the fact that the center, what was that?
Can I move on?
Yes, please. Unless someone has a question for you later, so we'll bring you back. So we thank you very much for the support and the collaboration with the Dominican Affairs Conference and the Institute for Latino Studies as well. So welcome to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Nestor. My name is Carlos Fernandez. I'm director at the Center for Latino Arts and Culture at Rutgers University. I'm a student affairs professional, and what I do is work with students to empower them and develop a pathway to succeed in college. It's a challenging environment. Just to give you a background, our population at Rutgers is about 6,000 Latino students, of which the majority are Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, Mexican, Peruvian are probably the main populations, Central American as well. It's a challenging environment because we have multi-sectional identities that we are seeing today in our classroom. students who are Puerto Rican Dominican, Jewish Puerto Ricans, Polish Puerto Ricans. We have a very diverse population coming through the university at this point. And so my challenge has been, how do I engage these students, help them identify a pathway that allows them to succeed. Some of the challenges that we hear from our students have to do with being undocumented, having problems with housing, not having financial resources to complete the university, the cost of being an out-of-state student, especially if they don't have in-state tuition, in spite of having New Jersey as their only home. Also not finding proper role models to see themselves in the classroom. For example, our faculty, Latino faculty at Rutgers University, in spite of the talk of diversity of the institution, is only 0.2% of the faculty population. So we have probably 13% of the student population are Latino, and only 0.2% of that population of faculty is Latino. So students don't see themselves.
Is that just here in Newark or?
No, that's across the board, including New Brunswick particularly. Newark has a better number of faculty that are minority, but as overall, the institution does not. And so our students have pretty tough challenges in succeeding. Most of them, over 50% of the Latino student population drops out after the second year. So the challenge is huge, and the solution needs to be collaborative. It also needs to be scaled up in a way that meets the needs of many students at Rutgers. So there's a couple of other examples that I could give. One is a great partnership that we have with the Jewish Renaissance Foundation in Perth Amboy. We've involved a number of our students in doing a collaboration with the city and the Renaissance Foundation as it seeks to create an arts council in Perth Amboy, and we're engaging our students in being part of that solution, interviewing artists, community members to identify what are some of the things that the city could do. And I could also speak about partnerships with Martin over here over the years. More recently, one that hits home is a situation in Hightstown, where many of our residents in Hightstown, New Jersey, were being targeted by a manager of an apartment building who would take their monthly rent and pocket it, overcharge for a number of improvements that were necessary to the apartment buildings. Working with Young New Jersey and with the New Jersey Legal Services allowed us to approach the mayor of the city of Hightstown in order to begin a conversation that led to police reports. People, undocumented people within the city, come out and going to the courts, issuing a police report, coming out of the shadows. And so I think that for all of us, the call is, it's not about whether we're Dominican or whether we're African American or Costa Rican or Honduran. It's about the needs of the population that we serve and trying to find the opportunities that exist and the coalitions that we need in order to address those problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see, building coalition of interest is not only about politics, it's about the actual needs of the community. And but we need to know who we are. We need to know from where we come from as a way of getting the information and understanding the importance, the significance of getting along with others that are in your habitat. So you need to coalesce with them, but at the same time you need to know who you are. In that light, I would like to call